The Committee on Homeland Security Subcommittee on Transportation and Protective Security will come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to examine how the United States Secret Service can more effectively achieve its mission of protecting the nation's leaders and financial systems. This hearing will address the agency's staffing, recruitment, and morale improvement efforts, as well as agency challenges such as resource constraints and misconduct. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. The subcommittee meets today to hold our first Secret Service-related hearing of the 115th Congress. Since this panel was tasked with overseeing the United States Secret Service just this year, I have already come to appreciate, as well as my colleagues have, the significant contributions this agency makes to the functioning of our government, as well as the challenges it faces in manpower, funding, and perhaps most important, morale. Having recently visited the headquarters of the Secret Service with Ranking Member Watson Coleman and other members of the subcommittee, I have seen the incredibly detailed and challenging work the men and women of this agency are accomplishing every day to safeguard our nation's leaders and ensure the security of America's financial system. While visiting the agency, I was briefed on investigations aimed at protecting businesses and individuals from financial crimes all across the country, even within a district I represent encompassing the Syracuse, New York area. Not only is this our first Secret Service hearing of the 115th Congress, but it's also the first time Director Alice has testified before us in his new appointed capacity as head of the Secret Service. And may I say, Director, in your previous career as a general, we want to thank you for your many, many years of service, and we appreciate all you've done for your country. For that, we welcome the new director and look forward to hearing more about his vision on how to improve and transform the agency moving forward. Indeed, most Americans know the Secret Service for its visible role in protecting the President, Vice President, and their families from threats to their safety. However, the agency also conducts elaborate, in-depth investigations related to financial and cyber crimes, which cut straight to the heart of the overall Homeland Security mission of the Department of Homeland Security. For example, on March 1st of this year, the Secret Service, in conjunction with a number of other federal law enforcement partners, helped facilitate the arrest and indictment of 19 people charged with defrauding 170 people, primarily in the United States, out of more than $13 million. Further, in November of 2016, the Secret Service conducted the largest ever seizure operation of $30 million in counterfeit U.S. currency in Peru. For the purpose for highlighting these operations is to note that these massive investigations were happening simultaneously with the Secret Service experiencing unprecedented strains on its protective missions. Protecting such high-profile events as the UN General Assembly, a number of last year's presidential candidates, the Republican and Democratic national conventions, and the recent presidential inauguration, to name a few. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it also included the Pope visiting New York City. Unbelievable job on all of those things, and the fact that all of them were safe is a testament to the professionalism of the Secret Service, and we thank them for that. Throughout all this, the agency has been professional and diligent, and for that, I commend the women of the Secret Service. With unprecedented mission requirements and a demanding work environment, it is concerning to see that over the last few years, all kinds of measurables have shown consistent decreases in workforce morale and sometimes performance at the agency. Through congressional oversight, third-party reviews, and internal agency initiatives, the Secret Service has been given a number of recommendations to improve morale, retention, and recruitment. While many of these have been adopted, this hearing will allow the subcommittee to delve into what more needs to be done to provide the Secret Service with the resources needed to continue fulfilling its mission, adequately staffing operations, and improving morale as we enter a new administration. No doubt, with this new administration comes new protective missions, challenges, and resource constraints which require congressional review to ensure efficiency and effectiveness. Oftentimes, the Secret Service is an agency that prefers to keep its head down and carry out its missions diligently away from the spotlight. However, we here on the subcommittee have a mandate to pay close attention to the successes, challenges, needs, and efforts of the Secret Service. I hope that the testimony before us today will delve into these issues and inform our work as we commit to working in a partnership with the Secret Service. The men and women working to carry out the mission of the Secret Service comprise one of the finest law enforcement agencies in the world, and we owe it to them to be responsible overseers for them and give them the tools they need to successfully do their job. Whether it be the Secret Service's special agents, criminal investigators, intelligence analysts, counter-assault team, emergency response team, aerospace security branch, or electronic crimes task force. We need to ensure that the agency is well-positioned to carry out its critically important mission and enhance the stability of our Homeland Security enterprise. And with that, I recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentle lady from New Jersey, my friend, Ms. Watson-Coleman, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here today. Director Alice, thank you for taking on this responsibility of leading the Secret Service. I do appreciate your willingness to serve the country. I do associate myself with the fine things that my chairman has mentioned with regard to your former career, and I look forward to establishing a working relationship with you. Mr. Roth, it is always good to see you here. I will start with saying that I am very concerned about the institutional, operational, and budgetary challenges that the Secret Service currently faces. Even prior to the election of Donald Trump, the Secret Service was plagued by low staff morale, low recruitment, low retention, source limitations, and cultural problems. Then we get to 2016. In that presidential election year, the Secret Service was busier than ever, protecting multiple presidential candidates, protecting President Obama, and overseeing security for major national and international events. The Secret Service remarkably rose to the occasion, did it all, and did it with low staff numbers. The demands of carrying out the protective mission have only expanded since the election. Today, the Secret Service must provide protection for the President, the First Lady, his children, including his adult children who travel regularly for business and pleasure to places like Uruguay, the UAE, and the Dominican Republic, Canada, and Aspen, Colorado. Through the winter, the President traveled weekly to his private club, the Mar-a-Lago Golf Club. Agents involved in currency and cyber investigation work have had to be reassigned to duties in New York City since the First Lady has continued to reside in the heart of Manhattan. Agents have been forced to crisscross the globe at what seems like a record pace, while the President Obama's travel totaled roughly $97 million for the entire 8 years of his presidency. Donald Trump's travel cost taxpayers $20 million in just the first 80 days of his presidency. Beyond the dollars and cents, though, there is a hidden cost. The time that the men and women who bravely serve in the Secret Service are taken away from their other Homeland Security and investigative work, as well as their families, as they shadow the globe-trotting Trumps. That's a tongue twister. I have heard story after story of Secret Service agents burning out, and we need to talk about this. Many of the burnout stories I heard were before Donald Trump took office, and I hope to hear today how the Trump family jet-setting lifestyle is impacting our Secret Service. Financial resources are also of great concern to me. Particularly, I am concerned that the Secret Service protection is being used while members of the Trump family are pursuing business interests abroad on behalf of the President at the expense of taxpayers. And I will be introducing a bill in the coming days to prevent the President from becoming enriched from these taxpayer dollars. In March, we learned that the Secret Service asked the Office of Management and Budget for an additional $60 million to carry out its current obligations. It was reported then that the White House flatly rejected the request. If that is true, that is absurd. Here you have an agency stretched thin prior to the administration. Their protectee assignments increased significantly with the new administration. Then they asked for additional money to absorb the new costs incurred, and they were rebuffed. I have little confidence that the President's budget proposal that was released 2 weeks ago is adequate for the agency. I hope that we hear today some honest expert opinions on what the Secret Service needs to address its longstanding challenges and carry out its mission. I also hope that we get a chance to hear today how the Secret Service is addressing some of the longstanding concerns on management practices that came to light in the Moore racial discrimination litigation and the recommendations that were made by the Protective Mission Panel. Mr. Chairman, I do want you and everyone on our subcommittee to know that I am here to work hand in hand with you and to help provide the Secret Service with the needed resources and oversight. I hope that Director Alice's leadership will pick up where Director Clancy left off in implementing key reforms to improve the agency's performance, address staffing challenges, and elevate the agency's standing with employees and prospective employees. And once again, I want to thank both witnesses for appearing before us today. I look forward to our testimony, and with that, I yield back the balance of my time to the chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Watson-Coleman. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are very pleased to have with us two very distinguished witnesses to speak on this important topic. Let me remind the witnesses that their entire written statements will appear in the record. Our first witness is Director Randolph Ellis, who was confirmed in April of 2017 as the 25th Director of the United States Secret Service in their long and storied existence. Director Ellis oversees the agency's missions in more than 150 offices throughout the U.S. and abroad. Prior to this appointment, Director Ellis was the acting Deputy Commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, serving as the Chief Operating Officer. The Director served in the U.S. Marines for 35 years, retiring as Major General. Sir, thank you for your service again and dedication to this country. The Chair now recognizes Director Ellis to testify.
Thank you very much, Chairman Katko and Ranking Member Watson-Coleman, and distinguished members of the committee. And it's a privilege to appear before you today and to represent the outstanding men and women of the Secret Service. Since my swearing in as the 25th Director, I've met personnel across all job categories, and I'm reassured by their professionalism and their commitment to the agency's mission. It's not lost on me that I'm the first Director to be named from outside the organization in over 70 years. The last Director in 1947 was the last non-agency Director. So although I face a steep learning curve to understand this unique law enforcement agency, I believe the mission focus of the Secret Service has much in common with the ethos of my entire career. My experience as a military officer with the Marine Corps and serving as the acting Deputy Commissioner over Customs and Border Protection have provided me with common ground to successfully lead the agency. So I'd like to take a moment to recognize the protection successes of the agency and its public safety partners at all levels. Over the past 2 years, the Secret Service coordinated security for 11 national special security events and the Pope's visit to Washington, New York, and Philadelphia, the national political conventions, and the presidential inauguration. More recently, in locations faced with the persistent threat of terrorist attack, Secret Service personnel effectively coordinated the complex security arrangements for the 11-day foreign trip of Vice President Pence throughout Southeast Asia and Australia, and the 8-day foreign trip by President Trump to Saudi Arabia, Israel, Belgium, and Italy. So even as protection has been and remains our primary focus, the agency has prioritized its resources to effectively further the investigative mission. In fiscal year 16, our field officers closed over 3,500 criminal cases, resulting in over 2,100 arrests. The agency remains committed in advancing its capabilities to stop cybercriminals like Roman Seleznev as they develop innovative ways to compromise our financial institutions. Seleznev, one of the most prolific traffickers of credit card data in the past 10 years, targeted over 3,000 banking and financial institutions, which incurred a total loss of $169 million. The long and painstaking investigation conducted by our personnel working closely with several state and local partners resulted in Seleznev's arrest and subsequent 27-year federal prison sentence. It should be noted that the accomplishments of the agency have been borne by a workforce that continues to be significantly understaffed to meet current operational demands. This has caused an undue burden on the existing workforce and has contributed to an attrition rate that is far too high. Staffing, retention, and improving morale are top priorities. I'm fully devoted to addressing these problems and have already implemented some promising solutions recommended by our employees and our senior leaders. For example, we have put in place several efficiencies in our employment practices, reducing the hiring time from more than 15 months to just 4 months. Hiring the best candidates and reducing attrition are critical to the agency's endurance as a top law enforcement organization. These men and women are among the most highly skilled in the federal workforce. Their skill sets and professionalism make them highly desirable across government and the private sector. It is clear that increasing staffing to healthier levels will likely have a positive effect on attrition and retention, contributing to a better work-life balance and increased training opportunities. There's no quick fix when it comes to growing staffing levels. Although the agency requires time to fully realize its personnel needs, we will not take shortcuts to compromise our high standards. We're building on the momentum of our positive recruiting efforts in FY17. We expect to hire about 300 special agents, 280 uniformed division officers, 260 administrative, professional, and technical staff. And our strategic human capital plan includes an addition of 450 special agents, 150 uniformed division, and 300 APTs by the end of FY19. So while we made significant progress on our hiring goals, we realize these achievements have the effect of running in place if attrition is ignored. The agency's retention efforts have targeted every sector of our workforce. With the assistance of the Department and Congress, we have implemented the UD retention bonus program as well as student loan repayment and tuition assistance programs. The 114th Congress passed H.R. 6302, the Overtime Pay for Protective Services Act of 2016, which allowed our personnel to be compensated above the statutory salary cap for the 2016 presidential campaign year. That was a tremendous morale boost, and I thank you all for seeing that through to its successful completion. I see that as a substantial challenge now and going forward. So in closing, I'd like to thank former Director Clancy for his commitment to the exhibit while he was the director of the organization. His efforts on the workforce and its critical mission have resulted in progress mentioned to date. I also would like to take this opportunity to thank retired Chief Kevin Simpson for his leadership in the Uniform Division. So as we move forward, I intend to focus considerable effort on the continual improvement of the agency to include the Secret Service security posture at the White House, increase staffing and funding levels, while reinforcing core principles of leadership and professionalism, which are critical to success. So Chairman Katko, Ranking Member Watson-Coleman, and members of the committee, this concludes my oral testimony, and I welcome any questions that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Ellis, for your testimony and statement. We appreciate very much you being here today, and I mean, I think I speak for Ms. Watson-Coleman. I know I do when I say that we view this committee as something of a corroborative nature with you and cooperative nature instead of an adversarial nature. So going forward, I hope that we can continue to have these types of give and takes so that we can really help the agency grow and do the things it needs to do to increase morale, which I think is a huge important problem with the agency. Our second witness is Inspector General Roth, who currently serves as Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security. Prior to his appointment as Inspector General, Mr. Roth served as a director of the Office of Criminal Investigations at the Food and Drug Administration and was Chief of Staff to the Deputy Attorney General. And way back when our paths crossed, we were both at Department of Justice in the narcotics section as baby prosecutors. And I remember, I've known Mr. Roth for quite a while. And I must say, Mr. Roth, you serve a critical role within the Department of Homeland Security's function in ensuring that the proper performance and efficiencies are identified and the inefficiencies in the agencies so that we can correct them. So I commend what you do on a regular basis. And we've had a long history with you testifying before our committee, and we've always come away impressed with your thoroughness and your willingness to make sure you get all the issues out so we can make it a better agency, both at Homeland Security level and at the sub-levels like the TSA and Secret Service and the others. So we recognize you for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Katko, Ranking Member Watson-Coleman, and members of the subcommittee. Thanks for inviting me here today to testify about our work regarding the U.S. Secret Service and give you some insights into the challenges that they face. Simply stated, that we believe that the Secret Service needs to continue to focus on management fundamentals, particularly how it relates to how it hires and manages people and how it manages and plans for its resources, including technology and information technology. Although we have seen encouraging progress, many of the implemented changes will require long-term leadership commitment and additional funding. We are encouraged by the fact that for the first time, the Secret Service developed a mission-based budget for fiscal year 2018, which should start to address many of the causes of equipment and personnel shortfalls. However, we should not underestimate the challenges the Secret Service faces ahead and the time it will take to fix them. We estimate, for example, that it will require the Secret Service to have about 8,200 personnel by 2022, about 1,700 more than they currently have, in order to have sufficient personnel to conduct its mission, including the very critical element of training. We think that the President's request for fiscal 2018 for 450 more personnel is a step in the right direction, but will be insufficient to meet current needs. Inadequate workforce strength results in little or no training, mistakes due to workforce fatigue, decreased quality of work life, poor morale, and increased attrition. Until the Secret Service can hire and retain a workforce at or exceeding its workforce staffing models, this will continue to be a problem. During our review of the 2014 White House fence jumping incident, for example, we found that staffing shortages for uniformed officers led to excessive overtime, inadequate training, fatigue, low morale, and attrition. An internal Secret Service report describes similar effects on special agents. Likewise, during another audit in 2015, we observed 2 uniform officers sleeping at their posts. Fatigue from travel, overtime shifts, and long hours contributed to these incidents. Compounding this problem is Secret Service's inability to hire efficiently enough to overcome their attrition levels. In fiscal 2016, the Secret Service suffered more attrition than any time in its history, beating its 2015 levels, which itself had also set a record. This kind of attrition is troubling in and of itself and is both a symptom and a cause of deeper Secret Service troubles. Since 2011, the Secret Service has been able to hire more people than they lost only in 1 year, and thus far this year are on track to lose more people due to attrition than they have been able to hire. Part of the problem is that the Secret Service is slow to hire. The last year we measured this, in 2015, it took 298 days to hire a special agent and 359 days to hire a uniformed officer. The Secret Service will continue to be challenged by a lack of dedicated human resources staff, which lengthens Secret Service hiring processes. At the end of 2015, for example, 32% of human resource positions at the Secret Service were vacant. Until they are able to get their hiring right, they will continue to be understaffed, which will exacerbate the problems which will lead to greater attrition. Additionally, the Secret Service has had difficulty keeping pace with technological advancements. Instead of investing in cutting-edge technology and driving research and development, the Secret Service has relied on outdated systems and equipment with potentially dangerous consequences. For example, in a January 2016 report, we found that many of their radios were well beyond their recommended shelf life or service life and were difficult to repair. Then in April of 2016, we reported that the confluence of technical problems with radios, security equipment, and notifications impeded the Secret Service's ability to apprehend an intruder who had jumped over the north fence and entered the White House. While the Secret Service has begun to address these issues, for example by appointing civilians with specialized expertise to critical leadership roles, it will require an extended leadership commitment and a significant investment in resources to put the Secret Service back on the right path. We found similar issues with regard to the Secret Service's information technology. Special agents were able to access the personally identifiable information of House Oversight and Government Reform Committee Chairman Jason Chaffetz because the Secret Service was using old, insecure data systems with inadequate controls dating from the 1980s. This occurred because of a lack of Secret Service priority on IT management. Specifically, we found limited authority for the Chief Information Officer, a lack of focus on IT management, vacancies in key IT leadership and staff positions, and inadequate training. The Secret Service has recently initiated steps to improve its IT management structure, which may give more priority to the leadership, policies, personnel, and training needed to ensure protections for sensitive systems and data. The Secret Service's statutory responsibilities leave no room for error. Fully implementing changes and resolving underlying issues plaguing the Secret Service will require a sustained commitment and depend heavily on adequate funding and staffing. We will continue to monitor the Secret Service's progress as it takes corrective actions to address vulnerabilities. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your invitation to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions you or other members of the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Roth, for your testimony. We definitely appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here today. We know that your time, along with Director Al's time, is very valuable, but I think this is also important what we're doing here today. The chair now recognizes myself for 5 minutes of questions. And I will note, since there's only a relatively small size of the panel, that we'll have some flexibility with respect to the amount of time we use. So first of all, I want to do something a little different. I normally don't do this, but I think it's pretty apparent what the primary issue is with respect to Secret Service, and that is the morale issue, which is tied to manpower and manpower-type issues. They're just stretched too thin. So before I came here, I was a federal prosecutor and doing organized crime cases for 20 years, and I routinely came across Secret Service agents in the field. And I was always struck by the fact that they'd be doing criminal cases, doing good criminal cases, and all of a sudden they're yanked out to do a protective detail. So they had these bifurcated responsibilities that were quite difficult. I also was mindful of the fact that their time constraints were unlike any other agency I've ever encountered. So I went back and kind of canvassed my old pals, if you will, and got input from them. So I just want to read to you some of the input that I got from them in the field, because I think what we really need to do is think of it, look at this through the prism of the guys and gals in the front line and see what they're experiencing, what their thought process is now, and maybe we can generate some discussion from that. And I'm just going to go in no particular order of importance. Number one, the new agents we have hired in the past 3 years, or in recent past, about 40% leave within 3 years. So there are probably only 1,200 agents in the field offices, and we are getting crushed. This does not include agents on the details to DC. We have about a total of 2,000 or 2,200 agents. Our numbers are way down. The 3,200 administration staff includes support staff. We are top heavy with 14 and 15 bosses. I'm not sure which branch you're particularly referring to. We need to be under a different retirement system. We're under the FERS, and we should be under the Coast Guard retirement system. This would differentiate us from other agencies, boost morale, and maybe we could hire more people. You can't do this job for more than 20 years at the pace where you're going. Another one, they have to lift the max out of the pay cap. I made 104 hours of overtime in the month of April, and will only see 16 hours of that money for the month. The rest I won't see. Anything over 162 hours now through the rest of the year, I will never see a penny of that money. The hiring push over the last 3 years has netted only 5 agents total. That's pretty stunning if that's true. Between people retiring, leaving the job in droves, and new hires, we have netted only 5 agents. Morale is terrible. And we are all constantly working long hours, traveling all the time, away from home, and not getting compensated for it. There is no work-life balance, and the other 1811 federal agencies have much more balance than we do. There's a major disconnect between upper management in DC and what is really going on in the field. From 1997, this is particularly troubling to me, from 1997 to 2000, the Secret Service hired quite a bit of agents. There are about 450 to 550 agents that can retire within the next 1 to 3 years. If you don't give them some incentive to stay, they're going to retire. That is a huge number of agents and experience leaving the service at once and will cause a very large void. By no means are these exclusive to some of the comments that I heard, but they do kind of highlight some of the things I did hear. And this is not here to, I didn't do that to set up a series of complaints or searing questions, but more to generate discussion about how to address the problem. And I think we've all kind of identified it to some extent, but the brass tacks gets down to what do you need? And so with that, I'll just ask you, Director.
So thank you, sir. Actually, I was talking with Inspector General Roth beforehand. I see my key, the number one thing I have to work on is in the area of leadership. So all these things stem out of that particular area. Morale, resources, hiring, all those, I think, come from that common point. So that's not to say that we don't, so everything you have said, I don't have any, I'm not sure exactly on the numbers he said, but all the rest of it sounds pretty consistent. I mean, one of the impressive things about the agency is they get the job done no matter what. And as I tell them, that's good and that's bad. It's good that they're doing the mission. The bad part is where's the work-life balance for the agency, for our uniformed division officers and our special agents, and it's generally not there. And then you throw on top of that the pay cap issue, and as I say, you know, how fair is it to ask people to work for free, which is basically what happens when they hit that biweekly cap. They keep on working, and they get the mission done no matter what. So
Right, and I just interrupt you there for a moment. It's stunning to me that this is early June, and this person that gave me that information has already used up all in any overtime, and so for the rest of the year, when he's working hundreds of hours of overtime, sometimes on a monthly, certainly on a monthly basis, there'll be zero compensation for that. I don't know how that doesn't affect you and how it doesn't affect performance in some people down the road. But you're right, you're absolutely right. It's remarkable how good a job they do under these circumstances. So please continue.
So I think, you know, as you are saying, and I'm sure the entire committee is implying too, we owe it to them not only to pay them, but to give them better working conditions than they have now. Part of that, a lot of that revolves around leadership, which is going to affect morale. I've got to find a way to stem attrition. I can't do that if they don't see any hope for the future. So as long as they see them working, you know, as I like to say over at the White House, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and then having their days off canceled, I mean, we're going to make little progress. In the field, when they're, we're estimating this year, we're going to have about 500 to 700 agents that are, again, going to exceed this pay cap. So, again, I'm going to be making people work for free, They have to do the mission, they do the mission, but I really view that as unfair in an area that we need to aggressively work on correcting. So I think from our standpoint is, it's a leadership aspect in terms of affecting their morale. It's trying to hire more agents and stem the attrition. The hiring actually is going well. We actually, hopefully, Mr. Roth was laying out some numbers there. We'll reach 6,800 this year. We are making better progress than we have been in the past. All of the classes are being filled, but again, as highlighted by the committee and also by the Inspector General, there are issues on attrition. We have to address those. Part of that is engagement with the workforce. That's my responsibility to get out there and make sure they understand we recognize their problems and we're going to correct those issues, that we're not just standing idly by while it happens. But in the meantime, it's not something that's necessarily a quick fix either. So it's a continued pressure against that. We recognize resource deficiencies mentioned by the Inspector General. We estimate generally we're short probably $200 to $300 million a year for what we need to do to actually hire people, have the correct technology in place. He talked about IT issues, certainly don't disagree with any of those things. So some of those do revolve around resource issues, but getting good programs in place, having good leadership to lay down those programs and execute those programs are all critical to fundamentally resetting where the Secret Service is.
Thank you, General. There's going to be, I keep calling you General, Director. We'll be going back and forth. It'll take a while to get used to not calling you by your old title. But we'll definitely have to get back with more of this, and I trust my colleagues will do that in their questions. But I want to hear from Mr. Roth as well on this. And quite frankly, what we do need, though, is, basically a tick list of what we really need. And so with that, I'll let you tell it.
I mean, sure. I think it's in two things. One is money, and two is a focus on management fundamentals. So, for example, when we took a look at law enforcement hiring, and we did a report that was issued a couple months ago, we looked at Secret Service and we looked at ICE and CBP. When we asked for data, for example, they couldn't give us real-time data as to how many people were in the pipeline, where they were, because they didn't have any data systems that would allow them to track the kind of hiring they need. And this is something that is fundamental and basic in any private corporation or private industry, to be able to streamline the kinds of data systems that you have. So, for example, Secret Service has two different data systems that don't talk to each other. So there has to be a manual input of data from one system to the other. Likewise, they have the SF-86, the security clearance form that most agencies have filed electronically. Secret Service doesn't have that capability. So people fill that out, they email it in a PDF. That PDF then gets printed by the Secret Service and then reviewed manually. It's just not a very efficient system. And what we found also is that they had a shortfall, and it seems trivial, but it's not trivial, of personnel specialists. I mean, these are the folks that have to sort of write the position descriptions, get the bus qualified lists together, get the kinds of information out so that Secret Service can hire. And I would just say that the information that you have given Congressman Katko is consistent with the data that we have seen, that it is an uphill battle to hire more than they lose, and they're in a vicious cycle, because the more they lose, the more they have to work their current personnel. The more they work their current personnel, the more that they lose. So they
I have to just interrupt you for a second. That's what worries me so much about this big bulge that's coming near retirement age, retirement to 17 to 20 years. Right now, that pipeline that's coming up in the next couple of years. You're talking about almost a quarter of the frontline agents that do the protection. That's frightening to me. So if you can address that as well.
I think that's right. And so if you're hiring 400 or 500 people a year, that's great. But if those get eviscerated by losing 400 or 500 people a year, then you need to sort of rethink how it is that you hire folks. And again, I'm encouraged by the fact that the Secret Service now, for the first time, has a workforce that's not simply special agents doing technical work. So they have, a CIO who is somebody who specializes in that and is not simply a special agent who got promoted to that. Somebody in personnel the same way. They have an individual for management who is on the same level as the deputy director. So they're doing all the right things. It's just a race to try to be able to get the efficiencies that they need, get the resources that they need to do the job.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Of course, there's much more I could follow up on, but I think it's time for the chair to recognize the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Ms. Watson Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. it's clear that a really big issue that the Secret Service has, in addition to many others, challenges, I should say, is the lack of resources, human resources in particular. And so I am struck by a couple of questions that I need to ask to get some clarification on, and to see whether or not this is having a different impact on the Secret Service than you've experienced, the agency has experienced in the past. For instance, I know that we are, that we have a responsibility to Trump Tower, to protect Trump Tower when the president is there. We have an additional, a different responsibility here, I think, because the First Lady stays there and uses that as her primary residence. I believe that that's somewhat unprecedented to have the First Lady live someplace other than her husband, the president. But that places additional strain on your already strained resources, both financial and personnel. And so, Mr. Alice, what are we doing to sort of acknowledge that and prepare for that? And to, in that same vein, I also know, you might want to write these questions down. I also know that we are now have a responsibility, and a legitimate one, to provide protective service to almost triple the number of people associated with the first family than we've experienced since 1988. And that there are some unique opportunities there to provide protection as it relates to some of the older children, the adult children, going around the world and going around the country, and advancing their business opportunities that are really still connected to this president, because he hasn't really divested himself of those. So I'd like to know the kind of relationship we have, and are we being reimbursed in any way, shape, or form for that kind of traveling and protection that is taking place? Do you distinguish personal travel from professional travel?
So I think
And then last, there's only a three-part question. I know it sounds like it's going on forever. But the last part has to do with, do we have any idea what kind of challenge the president's trips to Mar-a-Lago and other golf courses on a very, very routine basis will have on your resources as they exist now, as they're proposed in this upcoming budget? And should we be looking to provide you additional resources in order to meet what seems to be an increased challenge? So if you would just kind of start with those sort of three areas. And I do have some other questions.
Okay, very well, ma'am. I think I would start off by saying clearly the Trump Tower has been designated as one of his residences. It's not unusual, I would say, and we would understand this as parents. They wanted their son to finish the school year in New York, and the plan is to move down this summer, and that will alleviate some of the pressure up there, that area.
Let me ask you this question then. So then you won't be providing this 24-hour security at 365 days a year at the Trump Tower. You will only be providing it when the family, the president family, are there, because and they will be there when they're not at the White House.
We will
or Mar-a-Lago.
still, because the sons will be there, we'll still be providing security. The levels of it, we're going to look at how we can modify those levels. Yeah, the sons that reside in the tower. That's where they work out of. So that will continue. But anyways, but the First Lady and their youngest son will move down here this summer, which will alleviate some of the pressure on that. But I would just mention also, I mean, when it comes to these to the residences and the trips and those things, this is all in statute, ma'am. I'm simply doing what I'm required to do by law, and the agency is, and I have no flexibility there whatsoever. So I really don't have the option to, not to resource it or make requests for that. I mean, we are doing that as a presidential protection mission. That is what's required in statute. And as I would just amplify, in the post-9/11 era and the era of the London Bridge in Manchester and the threat environment, of course, is not becoming more benign. It's a more serious threat environment, and we have to think about that as it affects his entire family and the other protectees we have to cover.
we will continue to provide this kind of protection at Trump Towers because that is where the Trump business efforts are taking place. That's
Where
what you
his-
just said.
Again, it wouldn't really
That's what-
matter if it's a Trump business. The sons are there and by statute.
But it is
we're
the Trump
required-
business.
Understand, I'm just saying, ma'am, if there was no business, by statute, it'd still protect the sons. That's what's required by law.
Okay. Do you have a number? Do you have any idea what it costs us to rent the space that we've created as a protection in the Trump Tower?
I do not off the top of my head.
All
We
right,
have to
if you
take that
don't,
as a
could you
record.
possibly provide that for us?
We can take that as a record question.
Okay, Mr. Roth, this is something that I raised yesterday. I guess I have no idea what it was. Last time we had a hearing with CHS on the budget, Secretary Kelly was in. I'm very concerned that your budget is being reduced by 9%. And I asked the secretary about that, and he said, well, it's not going to interfere with anything that you're doing or anybody is doing in that space. But I'd like to know from your perspective, what does that 9% reduction represent in your ability to do your job and the resources necessary to do it?
It is about, by our calculation, about a 10% reduction from 17 services to what the president proposes in fiscal 2018. That represents about a 15% decrease in the number of people that we would have. So it will decrease the tempo of the kinds of audits, inspections, and investigations we will do at the same time that the department itself is growing by about 6%. So we are going down while the department is going up. And they are going up in very high-risk areas, Customs and Border Protection, increased infrastructure investment in the southwest border barrier, those kinds of things, which really are our meat and potatoes, what we spend a lot of time looking at because they are risky areas for the department, we will be unable to do anything with. Likewise, in the cyber area, our desire is to increase our oversight over how it is that DHS does cyber, both within the department as well as government-wide. We will be unable to do that work as well. So it will have a significant impact on what we will do, assuming that the president's budget becomes law.
Thank you. Mr. Isles, one of the things that we talked about is a kind of training to make sure that our officers on whatever level have the kind of experiences and scenarios that prepare them for the breach that was that happened at the White House. And I believe that there was a proposal and a request for some kind of a White House mock-up to be used through the training center, Raleigh Training Center. Did I have that correct?
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
that's correct.
What is your opinion about it being eliminated from the budget request, and how essential do you think it is in terms of keeping our president and his family and the people that are there safe from these kinds of intrusions?
I mean, like other things, it's resource priorities. It's one that we have requested now as an unfunded item, but we do view that as important to the training of our agents overall. Otherwise, we have to try to run these scenarios on the White House grounds. That has severe limitations because we're working with actual conditions, alarms, people that are actually armed with live weapons. So we have to be we have to approach that very gently, I guess is how I'll say it. So that training center would absolutely help us run scenarios, particular scenarios that might be more complex attack scenarios in a more effective way. So it is clearly something that we will continue to ask the department for in terms of funding. And we've scoped out exactly what the amounts that we need for that are, and would like to see that funded in the future.
Thank you. I'm just going to wrap up here, but I'd just like to ask a general question. In addition to asking the questions about the costs associated with the protection at the Trump Tower, what we're paying the Trump Organization as a rent in order to do this, and things of that nature. In general, are you comfortable with the budget request as it responds to what you see as your needs in order to ensure that you have good morale, good employees, happy employees, effective employees, and sufficient staff to do its job? That's number one. And number two, I guess this is for you, Mr. Roth, since I'm just going to sneak this in. what is it specifically that we do at the Secret Service in the hiring practice that slows down the process that is being done better and could be done even better? And with that, I will yield back to my chairman after you answer these.
So, ma'am, I would comment that I think the budget is requesting the resources we need, which will help in terms of hiring, which will affect morale. But I would also say, as I indicated earlier, that as we look at our total organization, what we need to purchase to do our protection mission or investigation mission more effectively, we're generally running on the $200 to $300 million a year short of what would be required there. Again, like other parts of the agencies, we have to compete in the department for funding. That's our job to continue to do that and justify our requirements.
Right now, you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're taking people off of their type of investigation, criminal investigation work, to put them on some protection work. So that's negatively impacting your investigation, criminal
Right.
investigation work.
So over time, our investigations drop when we have to do this much protection. So clearly, raising the number of agents we have in the organization, also raising the number of uniformed division officers in the agency would help us greatly.
Mr. Roth.
With regard to their budget, we do not think that the budget is sufficient. I know that Mr. Ailes is constrained to support the president's budget. I'm not similarly constrained because of the IG Act. We do not think it is sufficient. We think that it is, they need more personnel. With regard to what can they do better, we wrote a report about law enforcement hiring that puts forth specific recommendations as to what the Secret Service can do. But a couple things is, one, they need to ensure that they have a polygraphy staff that is well-staffed and it's not a collateral duty, and that they have a full court press to ensure that that's not a bottleneck. They need to modernize their systems, their information technology systems when it comes to hiring, to ensure that they're not doing sort of duplicative work or having data systems that don't talk to each other, so there's a lot of manual entry, those kinds of things. And then they need to ensure that they have a full staff of personnel specialists. Frankly, you can't overstaff this, given sort of the full press that they're going to have to do to get the kind of personnel on board in a fast manner. So those would be our recommendations. In that report, the Secret Service has agreed with our recommendations and is moving forward with those.
Thank you. I just need you to know that it is important for us to work together to make sure that you have the resources that you need to keep our first family safe, as well as to do the kind of investigations that you do in your business. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I want to ask unanimous consent for Mrs. Sheila Jackson Lee to be on our panel, to be recognized and be able to ask questions.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson-Coleman. The chairman will now recognize other members of the committee for questions they may wish to ask the witness. In accordance with our committee rules and practice, I plan to recognize members who are present at the start of the hearing by seniority on the subcommittee. Those coming in later will be recognized in the order of arrival. The chair now can recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ellis, Mr. Roth, thank you for coming, and also thank you for the work you do. It's not easy. Coming from a federal law enforcement background myself here, I want to share with you a few things. Number one, you know, it's easy to criticize agencies like the Secret Service, but these are men and women that you represent. They make a conscious decision to put their life on the line in defense of others. So please thank them on behalf of our committee. And if I could just offer one piece of advice from the agent's perspective, focus on morale, because it's very, very important. I can't think of a more important job as leaders of an organization than to watch the morale of your agents, because the higher the morale is, the safer we are as a country. I want to focus on the budget, which Ms. Watson-Coleman had addressed. The overall department's budget is going up, one of the few in the proposed budget. However, certain subsets are going down, most notably FEMA, as well as the OIG. So, Mr. Roth, I believe that certain outlays of money are investments and not expenses, because they ultimately result in a cost savings. The mission of the OIG is to cut back on fraud, waste, and abuse, which presumably would save the agency money and make it more efficient in the long run. What specific programs, you started to address this, what programs will you be making the decision to cut back on, since you're going to be managing that budget? What specifically is going to be cut back so that we know what we can advocate for?
Thank you for that. And, you know, our budget history has been very positive since my arrival. Both 2015, 2016, and 2017 have invested in the OIG with the idea, as the Brookings Institution had done a study just last year, saying that if you actually cut IG budgets, it actually costs you money when you cut IG budgets. And, you know, we have certain metrics as to every dollar spent.
Of course
in
you're going to
IG.
say that, right?
Well, it's not just us.
I'm just kidding.
It's the Brookings Institution. And we do keep metrics, the statutory metrics, about every dollar that you spend on the IG. And I think community-wide, it's about $17 to 1. I don't have our figure handy. But the risks that the department faces are significant. And anytime that you have growth in any areas within the department, you're going to have risk. So if you're going to hire a significant number, for example, of Border Patrol agents or ICE deportation officers, that represents a risk to the department that has to be addressed. Our internal affairs function, for example, we have one special agent for every 1,000 employees in the DHS. It creates significant challenges. I can go on. For example, in our cyber area, we have tried to increase our capabilities in that area to determine whether or not the department is fulfilling its responsibilities in the cyber area, which is an enormous risk. I could spend your entire 5 minutes talking about the kinds of things that we do and why it's necessary for the kinds of budget support that we get, but I think you get the idea.
And Mr. Roth and Mr. Ellis, more importantly, Mr. Roth, because you oversee all of DHS for OIG. The Border Corruption Task Force, which sat at the FBI's headquarters, I was previously a part of that. How is that working? How are relations amongst the partners? Because as you're aware, there was some problems in the past there.
Yes, there were a number of problems in the past. I will freely acknowledge the fact that there were. A lot of it was on the fault of the OIG, and there was no question of that. I think we have mended those fences and are working well together. Frankly, it depends on what field office you go to. Some of it's personality-driven, and some of that is, as you know, very difficult to change. Institutionally, we support the Border Corruption Task Forces. We participate in them. We have individuals who are co-located in the Border Corruption Task Forces when we have the ability to. We only have about 250 special agents, probably 200 and some are in the field. We're not like the FBI with 10,000 agents, so we have to be careful as to where we put our personnel, but to the extent that we can, we co-locate them with the FBI in those kinds of cases.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. And I do want to note on the issue of the cuts to the OIG of DHS, there's a lot of talk about border security. One of the primary functions of your office is border corruption, which is as much of a vulnerability as a lack of a physical barrier, aerial surveillance, and the like. So all of that goes into the concept of border security. Would you agree with that? And that cutbacks to that segment of DHS's budget would actually go to the border security issue?
That's absolutely true, and that's especially true when you hire workforce, increase the workforce that does the border security. There have to be the cops on the beat, the people who police the police.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Fitzpatrick, excuse me. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Watson Coleman.
New Jersey.
I'm sorry.
Jackson Lee.
I have Watson Coleman on top of the list, and I didn't cross it out. Let's try that again. The chair now recognizes a gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Sheila Jackson Lee.
Mr. Chairman, I have absolutely no quarrel with being a twin of Ms. Watson Coleman. But let me thank the chairman and ranking member for their courtesies, and let me thank the Inspector General for and the new Director of Secret Service for their service to the nation. Let me as well indicate, some of your staff may be aware that I have been working with the Secret Service for a very, very long time as a member of this committee. And I want to, I'm not sure what's the problem with this. I want to ensure that you know that I appreciate your service greatly. And I believe the men and women, thank you. I believe the men and women it should be known that we appreciate the service that they give. I also want to take note of the fact, because of the able work of the staff of this committee, that I take very seriously the words of the Protective Mission Panel regarding the Secret Service paramount mission of protecting the President, First Family. I think it's also important other high-ranking officials, which is to allow no tolerance for error, and a single miscue or even a split-second delay could have a disastrous consequences for the nation and the world. We don't often be reminded of that, and I had the opportunity to see a movie that most people probably have not seen called Killing Reagan, and it powerfully exhibited the dangers that those who are in the Secret Service face when they are committed to putting their life on the line. I also take note that this organization has a problem with morale and attrition, and the issues are around the agent burnout due to inflexible schedules, long shifts, and agents having to work and not use their annual leave or potentially not receive overtime compensation. And so I want to have a reasoned line of questioning on that basis. And this would be to you, to the IG again. I believe that the $102 million cut is obscene. I think the President's budget is obscene. It is not realistic, and in all the lipstick on the pig that you try to place, such as the department is increasing, but the cut to the Secret Service is absolutely obscene. Would you comment, please, on how deep a debt it is to have agents that are burned out, have inflexible hours, who have the responsibility of protectees, no matter how large a group happens to be in the First Family?
Certainly, our prior work has shown the effect of overwork and fatigue, both on attrition as well as on mission capability. That our look back on the fence jumping incident, for example, showed that much of what occurred was because of inattention, we believe due to fatigue, because of radios that were 17 years old and outside of their effective life cycle, could not be repaired, for example. A number of errors upon errors, and I would agree with you that given the zero-fail mission of the Secret Service, we ought to be erring on the side of ensuring that they have the kinds of resources that they need. Again, in my testimony, I talk about the fact that they actually need about 7,200, let me make sure I get this right, about 8,200 personnel, about 1,700 more than they currently have. The President's budget asks for an increase of 450. We think that is insufficient, that they need to get to the staffing models that the Secret Service themselves have created, sort of on a zero, mission or a mission-based budget.
I'm going to interject because I have a series of questions for you.
I
and
apologize.
Courtesies of it. So if you could quickly, the $12 million that's cut from the National Computer Forensics Institute, can you, in answering that question, tell me how the Secret Service is keeping up with its criminal investigation duties while shifting significant resources to cover its expanded protectee mission? So a combination of losing computer training dollars in a federally funded training center, helping local law enforcement, and then the criminal investigation. Just quickly, a difficult challenge?
We haven't looked at that specific issue. I apologize for that, but we don't have an answer for that.
I would just comment, we will make efforts to reprogram money for
Mr.
that.
Director, I'm going to turn right to you. Just one moment. Can you finish? What did you say? You didn't what?
We haven't looked at that specific issue with regard to the specific fiscal 18 budget cuts.
But would it be difficult?
Of course, yes.
All right. I want to turn to the director, and thank you very much. As I indicated, welcome. Go right ahead. Criminal investigations, losing that money for the national.
So we consider it critical. We will move to reprogram money to make sure it's funded. It's very critical to state and local people, too. We train a lot of them down there in Hoover, Alabama.
Great. Let me just, if I might, if you indulge me just for a moment, two things I want to cast on you. First of all, we have, for a long time, this is to the director, worked to settle the Moore case. It has been settled. There is a judgment. There is money. I'd like to know the status of that case and how you're responding to making those people whole. The second, what I'd like is to try to understand the size of the First Family. I know some of this, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have in a classified setting. We may have had one and I might have missed it. But I would make the point that there should be no diminishing of security, but it is certainly an extensive burden when you have protectees that are part of the cabinet and sublevels that travel all over. So my question is, how are you facing that generally? Are you placing people at Mar-a-Lago continuously? Or people have to move back and forth? And if they wind up on the Mediterranean, do we have to send people there? We're not used to, we have humble people that are presidents. We're not used to having billionaires, self-stated billionaires, that have a life of frivolity, where they summer here and winter here, and the American people are still struggling to pay their rent. But the question is, if they wind up on the Mediterranean for frivolity, then you have to have international resources to take care of that. Is that correct? You don't yield that to an international resource, meaning you don't yield that to foreign service.
Well, if they're in a foreign country, ma'am, we do have to cooperate with foreign services and make agreements diplomatically on what services we can provide in terms of protection. So we will protect them, but we do have to do it in cooperation with
So
the
that's
country we go
costing
to.
money.
Clearly, when there's travel, there's going to be a cost associated with it.
So
I
it's-
would just mention that in terms of residences, unless they're there full-time, we don't necessarily have full-time protection of those residences. So a couple that you mentioned would typically be like travel locations. If they're going to go down there, we'll take necessary actions to ensure the site is prepared for the protectees to arrive.
I'll just finish on this point, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Again, I want to do everything I can to work with the Secret Service, because I do believe the storied history of the Secret Service deserves our acknowledgement, and certainly to the work you've done to the IG. I'm very grateful that you are not subject to political whims, so that we can get the Secret Service, both in terms of the quality of young men and women who I believe would be interested in being recruited, based upon salary and work conditions, but more importantly, not to say anybody shuns their service, but to have them at their peak, because their ultimate responsibility is to save a life. So this is a disappointing budget. You're being a good soldier to the director, but you're being a good soldier, and you're squeezing and picking and nitpicking and squeezing here and taking here. It's an absolute outrage, and I will frankly say that the Congress is going to ignore it completely and try to do what is right as it relates to the Secret Service. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back, and I look forward to some classified briefings where we can ask some more detailed questions about their work with protecting protectees. Thank you very much.
Yes, and we will definitely look at that in the future going forward as far as a classified briefing or hearing even for that matter. And thank you very much, Ms. Jackson Lee. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Isles, am I saying your name properly, sir?
Allah, sir.
Alice. Director Alice, thank you for your service. I've been a police officer for 14 years, SWAT for 12. It's interesting when we consider that the Secret Service was born of the Treasury Department to protect the people's treasure, and part of this committee's job, as we are a nation that faces a $20 trillion debt, is to protect the people's treasure. So let's work together. During the course of the history of the Secret Service, when President Obama traveled abroad, did the Secret Service provide protection?
Yes, sir,
When
absolutely.
he vacationed in Martha's Vineyard, did the Secret Service provide protection?
Yes, sir.
When President Bush was president, he traveled to Crawford, did the Secret Service provide protection?
Yes, sir.
When President Carter traveled, way back in the 70s, did the Secret Service provide protection?
Yes, sir.
When President Reagan went to the Western White House, did the Secret Service provide protection?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of any notation within the Constitution of these United States that limits the size of the first family's number?
No, sir. We're just
you,
required by
sir.
statute to protect them.
Let's move on, shall we? During the course of my career as a police officer, I've had the honor to work with the Secret Service on a couple of Treasury cases, and I find you gentlemen to be the most professional and tactically sound amongst our country. I thank you all for your service. When you spoke of running scenarios, you're referring to, of course, tactical scenarios like active shooter, barricaded hostage, VIP extraction, et cetera?
Those would be part of them, but also scenarios that might involve complex attacks in the White House.
Yes, sir. In the absence of a mock-up of the White House, Has the Secret Service conducted scenario training?
Only in a tabletop manner. We're looking at how we might do that at the White House itself. It has complications.
But do you not have access to facilities where your agents can use, can conduct tactical training with simunition, et cetera?
We do. What I would point out is one of the recommendations of the Protective Mission Panel was our training levels. Those have improved for our ERT people, but for our line agents and our UD agent officers, it is not because of the workload they're under.
Excellent answer. Regarding cyber security, Inspector General, I'd like to direct this question to you, sir. You've assessed that the Secret Service's efforts to update and modernize its aging information technology infrastructure. I recently traveled with this committee to Eastern Europe to study Russian aggression, including cyber attack. Considering the nature of the age of the IT infrastructure within the Secret Service, what challenges does this budget pose regarding hardening those systems and protecting them from cyber attack, specifically considering the fact that that the Treasury departments of other nations have been targeted by Russian cyber attack?
I think anytime that you have an old IT system, they're inherently vulnerable. And one of the defenses for an IT attack, a cyber attack, is to ensure that you have the most modern equipment with the most up-to-date software. It's very difficult in a budget environment that prevents you from having the kinds of technological refreshes that would, in fact, keep you up-to-date and keep you current on cyber defenses.
So do you have processes in place that have responded to the current heightened threat environment of cyber attack? Is the Treasury sufficiently protected from cyber attack?
Within DHS, we do reviews. The Federal Information Security Management Act requires annual reviews of every component's cyber posture, for lack of a better word. The department itself does monthly reviews and scorecards to determine whether or not each component within the department has the right kinds of protections in place. It is an ongoing challenge. It's a continuing challenge. DHS historically has been challenged in this area, and Secret Service has been especially challenged in this area.
Do you have dedicated staff that conduct cyber protection exercises?
The department does have a Chief Information Security Officer, and each component within DHS has a Chief Information Security Officer with staff whose job it is to harden the computer networks and measure exactly where they are on that spectrum.
Thank you for that very thorough answer, sir. Thank you both for being here today, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Before we conclude, Ms. Watson-Coleman has one quick question, and then I have a suggestion I want to proffer to both of you. So, Ms. Watson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for your generosity in this. It's actually a little bit more than one question. Just want to lay some things on the table that I hope that, so if you would like for us to.
No, it's no problem at all.
Okay,
We got some
okay.
flexibility. We
I
gotta
like
enjoy
that.
it.
Yeah,
All right,
I
go
like
ahead.
that. First of all, Mr. Alice, I did ask a question of you that I really want you to respond to. I don't know if you'll be able to respond to it now, but I am seriously interested in understanding our responsibility to the adult members of the Trump family that we are protecting while they are doing business to enrich the Trump agencies and what that means. I am also interested in following up specifically on the impact of the Moore settlement. What does it mean? Where are you all? What have you done? Sort of what your employment situation looks like. I want you to also know that I'm interested in both of your comments with regard to resources that are needed. For instance, the old radios and things of that nature. Well, what else are we talking about that I can't sort of quantify in this budget? What would it be and how much would it be? And lastly, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, because we've really covered a lot. I want you to know that I want to work with you all because I believe that your agency is so vitally important and we need to support the good men and women who are working there. I also look forward to our having our meetings in a more confidential way. And the other thing is this, for the record, I don't think that we should not be protecting each and every one of our presidents and their families as they're doing the traveling. But I really do need to reiterate for the record that in the entire Obama presidency, we spent $97 million on travel. On the first 80 days of the Trump presidency, we have spent 20 million taxpayer dollars. That must mean something in terms of our responsibilities and the needs associated with that. And with that, I yield back to my new chairman, and I thank you very much.
Thank the ranking member. I recognize myself for a moment. Gentlemen, regarding the budget as it's being discussed, and we hope that we can discuss this in a bipartisan manner. This committee recognizes the bipartisan nature of Homeland Security, and in every possible endeavor, we set politics aside and try to work together. So regarding the budget, could you give us a brief statement regarding how you would prioritize additional budget expenditures? Were we able to find the people's treasure to be wisely invested, as our colleagues have suggested? Could you give us some priorities?
So from a Secret Service standpoint, one already mentioned is IT technology and infrastructure enhancements. That's one top area for us. The training center out at Raleigh facility upgrades would help us significantly, along with the White House mock-up. And then beyond that, our weapons upgrades and then our armored vehicle upgrades, really the future program. The vehicles have to be refreshed, obviously, and replaced as they wear their heavy vehicles, and they do wear out. So those really are our top 5 needs that we're looking at right now. That's, I would just underwrite probably my number 1 need continues to be, as mentioned by the IG, is the hiring and continue to ramp up the levels in the Secret Service.
I'm impressed that you had that list on the top of your head. Can you provide that prioritized list to this committee, sir?
We can, yes, sir.
Thank you. So, and I'll relieve myself as chair. It's been a nice visit.
And might I say, he's done a superb job. Do you have any further questions?
I do, no.
Okay. Before we conclude, I do want to make a suggestion, and it's based on everything that's transpired today, but also from Mr. Ross' prior report and everything else. It's clear that some things need to be done. It's clear that this budget doesn't reflect it. And it's also clear that I think that Director Ellis may have some sort of constraints with respect to what exactly he's going to request because of his position. I understand that, but I want to suggest that we do something a little different here, and that is within a month, ask the staffs of the committee, as well as folks from Secret Service, as well as from the Inspector General's office, to come up, instead of with the general recommendations, the general observations of the problems, come up with specific requests of what you think we're going to need. And then let us see what we can do, okay? Make it your wish list if you wish, if you will. But there's obviously some systemic things here. Do we need to tweak retirement to reflect the fact we need to retain these highly specialized people in a different field? Do we need to do something about the pay? Obviously we do. Do we need to do something about the manpower? The major issues. Instead of just giving a top-line messaging, give us the nitty-gritty of what it is from that's different from the budget that we really need to do. And I encourage, that's the only way we're ever going to be able to really get to the bottom of this and try and really make some real changes. So, and quantify it, right, so that we can figure out exactly what it is we can do to try and help you, because this is a critical, I view this as a critical juncture for Secret Service. And Director Ellis is in kind of a good situation because you have the opportunity to have almost a clean slate. And this is a new hearing. There's a new committee here as far as our jurisdiction over Secret Service. So let us try and see what we can come up with, but let's do it in a collaborative effort and see what we can do. So I ask all of you within 1 month of today to come up with some suggestions as to possible fixes, be they legislatively or otherwise. Most likely be legislatively, and we've never been shy to do that. So let's take a look at that. Does that sound all right, everybody? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I want to thank all the witnesses for their testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7E, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.